roads lead to sustainability these days. So when we talk about the future, we talk about what corporations are doing, whether it's contracting or whatever it is. And it's like, I can link that to what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. And I promised a few people that you'll hear more about it today. So here I am, and you can hold me to my promise. So let me just quickly run through. This is a large deck, and the contents actually tell the story, and you will all get a PDF version of it, and you can read it, browse through it in your own free time. I'm just going to, since we have only 20 minutes, I'm just going to focus on some key slides and key messages. So to start with, a perspective on sustainability, just to set the context so that we all have a common understanding of what the word means and what how it relates to E, S, and G. The raison d'etre of a business has historically been to make money. No surprise. We've all seen that happen with most corporations, most for-profit corporations. From way back from the 16th century East India Company, and from that time till as recently as 1970, when Milton Friedman, the economist, wrote this article in the New York Times on September 13th, 1970. And you can look it up if you don't believe me. And he actually said a bunch of things with words like social and responsibility in quotes, which the tone indicates that he was obviously being quite acerbic about such notions, that a corporation should even care about what happens to people and communities that it touches. That was the belief till that time, and for quite some time after that. But strangely, or maybe that's how things evolve, within about 20 years, the United Nations and the Brundtland Commission, they came up with something called sustainable development. And that's when the word sustainable, it obviously existed even before that time, but kind of took on a different meaning and a more impactful kind of, shall we say, approach and it was mostly at the government and NGO level, and what we call the social sector today. It was basically those organizations that picked it up. But slowly, over time, it has percolated down to corporations. And we have now recognized within the model of capitalism, within the capitalistic society, it's up to businesses and people to really do something about the three dimensions that characterize sustainability. It's like any point in space has these three dimensions, X, Y, and Z axes. So, sustainability, really the trajectory can be plotted on environment, social, and governance. So ESG is just a handle. It's just an easy way of characterizing sustainability, but the bigger picture is really sustainability. And quite often people quarrel about whether something like supply chain management should be in social or in governance. It really doesn't matter. It's important to take a holistic picture. So in this slide, what we are talking about is the way Neo Group, my company, and our sister company, Supply Wisdom, my colleagues are right here. We've kind of been working closely. We've borrowed some concepts here and there. We've used their frameworks and so on. So here's how we see a business. The heart of the business is at the core there. Unfortunately, the color is a bit light. You may not see it, but it says the enterprise or the business or something. And it's surrounded by the primary set of stakeholders that impact it, which is the investors who actually put money into the business, the customers who buy from the business, the employees who work for the business, and the suppliers and the partners who provide inputs, raw materials, packing materials, whatever, and services to the business. And there's a give and take that happens between the business and all its stakeholders on a daily basis. So they can be called stakeholders in the literal sense that they hold a stake in your success and you hold a stake in theirs. So it's a kind of mutual interdependency. And that has now come to be recognized as what a company is accountable for. not just the investors for returning an ROI and giving back, shall we say, creating shareholder value, but also to all the other communities, all the groups of people that are touched by the business. And so that's the reason I just wanted to put up this slide. And then there's a set of secondary stakeholders around it, industry associations like GSA, market regulators, etc., where participants engage in a give and take which is related to the business itself. So the pressures on a business have been coming from all these different stakeholders that surround it. Investors have been saying, we'll invest money in you if you do more on ESG. Customers have been saying, I will only buy from you if you do ESG. Well, it may not have reached critical mass yet, but the trend is on the uptick. More and more customers are doing that in at least the Western Hemisphere. They're conscious of the impact on the environment, carbon, all of those things. Whether child labor or slave labor was involved in producing this particular widget. These are questions customers have begun to ask. Employees are asking those questions of their employers. So from all four sides, north, south, east, west, the pressures are on for a company to do something, whatever that thing is. So the paradigm has shifted, and I won't go through each of these points, but each of them represents a shift in the thinking of a business and what I call sustainable or sustainability thinking. Like I just talked about, historically we've come from a mindset that assumed abundance of natural resources. You could just go out and do as much fishing as you wanted and mine for minerals as much as you wanted, wherever you wanted. And the earth would just keep giving back. And that was fine, because the impact we were making, humankind as a whole, as a species, was just this much. But now we've come to a point where our technology and our scale has reached a level where we are actually causing irreversible impact on the planet. And that's where the problem is, right? So from a cornucopian worldview, we are moving to a Gaian worldview, where the earth is the center and we are dependent on it, and we need to do something about anthropogenic climate change, for example. So from with human beings as predators, we are moving to a more of a symbiotic exchange with our environment. So let me just move on. So these are the three main stages. And in one of my conversations yesterday, I said I will talk about this of maturity. So historically, we've been coming from a for-profit approach where, going back to the time of the robber barons in the U.S. and elsewhere, they did the business in the way they thought best, which was exploitative, which was predatory in parts. And then they had this whole charity thing going on, which is probably driven partly by religion, because some religions kind of require that if you have the wealth, you should donate it, and so on and so forth. And that was mostly discretionary and opportunistic. And guess what? It also had some positive, ramifications for the business itself. It was beneficial because it was good PR. Reduce, recycle, all of that helped you save costs. But that was mostly, again, opportunistic. So from there, the next level is where a lot of corporations are today, which is that they have some green initiatives and they have CSR things going on, corporate social responsibility, and they have a lot of corporate governance. So we see a lot of organizations who are in that stage. The third stage is what we call the sustainable enterprise, where all these three things converge, and there's an intersectionality to it, and there's a holistic view that the organization takes. There's no separate things called CSR or green initiative or corporate governance. It all merges into a big picture kind of sustainability point of view. And I could talk for hours about that, but I'm just going to move on to the actual survey that we did and why we did it. So many of our clients in advisory have been asking us, Because this has picked up so much momentum over the last maybe 5 years, and specifically post-COVID or during COVID. Many organizations have embarked on, along with supply chain resilience and digital transformation. The other big trend has been ESG in the last few years, particularly in the IT and business processing services sector, because their clients have been dependent on them, and they wanted to be able to show a certain level of sustainable transformation. So our clients were asking us, so we've heard about company ABC, who are their incumbents, for either software services or infrastructure or financial accounting or payroll or something like that. We've heard that they're doing something. We saw their annual report. Is it true? What do you guys know? Because we are in touch with the supply side. We see what we interact regularly with a lot of vendors. So they kept asking us advisors. And we used to just tell them what we saw. I mean, I used to speak about my knowledge, and my colleagues used to do the same. And at one point we said, let's put it all together. Let's be more objective and more fact-based, and let's actually go out there, do an outreach, speak to our suppliers, and ask them what they're doing. So that was the background to the survey. These were some of the companies that we talked to. Again, we didn't really throw the net out far and wide. We would like to. Maybe in 2.0 version of this survey. But to start with, we just called up the people we were in touch with on a regular basis. So a lot of them are the big names in the IT and business process services industry. Most of them responded. Our methodology was, okay, this is another interesting thing I wanted to talk about. So how many of you are familiar with what is called the watermelon effect? It's written up there, but from before. Yeah, there you go. Anybody else? Watermelon effect? No? Okay. This is what happens when you have all these beautiful dashboards, which have SLAs and KPIs and nice reports. And people usually use the traffic light metaphor, and it's all green, right? Everything is green. What's the status of so-and-so? Oh, it's green. But you go deeper inside it, the customer is not happy for some reason. And say, all my reports are showing green. Why am I not happy? So there's red inside that. So what are you measuring? Again, going back to what the slides Kerry put up yesterday. What are you measuring? How are you measuring it? These are the things we need to revisit, and that applies to ESG as well. Is the point I wanted to make here in this slide. So ours was not just a survey in terms of, okay, what is your GHG emission level, and things like that. But we also went into the mindset and the philosophy that the company, they're thinking about sustainability. So we plotted these two things on two axes, x-axis and y-axis, and we have a grid that I will show you. These are the two dimensions of ESG adoption. Yeah, and the survey itself was in two parts. We had a bunch of questions that were open-ended, which tried to establish, the executive sponsorship, the tone at the top, the extent to which the board was really, asking the company to do things on E or S and or G dimensions. And then we had, for each stakeholder category, we had a bunch of questions related to that. What are your employees doing about it? What are they thinking about it? Do you know? Have you gone out? Have you talked to them? Same thing for your customers. And so this was an open-ended questionnaire, not a multiple choice one. So they could, participants could type whatever they wanted. And we got a lot of interesting answers for each of them. The other part of the survey was close-ended. And then that's the framework which I'll present to you, and that's comes to us from our cousins in the Supply Wisdom company. The criteria for E, S, and G, and for each of those, we had a 5-point scale. Again, Kerry showed us some of that yesterday. 0 means you're not doing anything at all, no plans. 1 is, we're thinking about it, we want to do something, we're kind of trying to get some budget allocated. 2 is, it's all approved, it's all systems go, or we've got the green light from the board, and here's where we are, we've just started out. 3 is that we are in a fairly advanced stage, and 4 is It's done. We're over the hump. It's been integrated into our BAU, business as usual, and we're in steady state now. So from now on, we will always be doing this. So these are the 5 levels, if you like, of where a company could be on that journey for any of the criteria within E, S, and G. And this is what the criteria look like. I'll just leave it for a few seconds. You will all get copies of this, so you can go through it in your time. So that was on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, we had the cultural and attitudinal alignment. How well aligned are participants with the what ought to be the philosophy and the mindset of sustainability, and therefore, is their organizational culture, has it percolated down there from the top of the pyramid to down to all the employees? And our way of sampling that was looking at ourselves as stakeholders. If you take any of the vendors listed, at some point or the other, we've worked with them for our clients. We've run RFPs, and we've engaged with negotiations with them for negotiations to get clients the kind of deal that they really wanted, and so on. So when we do that, our face is that of the client. So we are a stakeholder in the sense that we represent the customer. We are advocates and influencers to customer decisions. So we become kind of the customers to them. So we are a stakeholder. So and what is the stakeholder experience? Like you have UI, UX, you have CX, you have SX, which is stakeholder experience of how a company behaves with respect to a stakeholder. So we use that as the dipstick to figure that out. And we had these few criteria, their responsiveness, their transparency, their diligence, and lastly, as you can see, the visibility of the passion of the company as far as doing things on the E, S, and G front were concerned. So there were a few surprises, but a lot of it was pretty much what we expected. We kind of knew that at least the top tier and the companies that we talked to were mostly in the top tier. They would have these programs. We were already aware of some of that. So we weren't particularly surprised when we saw very high scores on the x-axis, between 3 and 4 for most of them, which is basically we're well on our way, and in some cases we've already crossed the hump and we are in steady state. So for the most part, it was between 3 and 4. A few were between 2 and 3, scores. That was not surprising. But what was surprising is that some of these large players, they had not gone through and this is when we realized that it was important to do the soft criteria as well. Again, watermelon effect. I mean, you can do, if you're given a target, I don't know who said this, that there's a quote that says that when a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure, right? Because then you know what you're shooting for. Okay, I've got to hit this, and this. So let me just do that and get over it. Well, you haven't really embraced the whole philosophy, right? If something else pops up, you don't know how to respond because nobody's told you these should be your targets in this area. So if a corporation has actually understood and embraced sustainability, it would show in the way they deal with their stakeholders. So that was our premise. And so we found most of the participants were between stages 2 and 3. All right, so another quick note on the organization. So while most of them were centralized, they had a chief sustainability officer explicitly called out who basically focused only on that. But the rest of it was federated in as much as, they didn't actually have a department for that. They had people who are kind of co-opted from different parts of the organization and rolled up to a team that reported to the CSO. In some cases, the CSO was also the CRO, the Chief Risk Officer, or the CFO, or the Chief HR Officer, depending on where they saw for that industry, for that business, whether they were impacting more on the environment side or on the HR side. That was the sustainability responsibility was aligned with the CXO in that particular area. In some cases, we found that it was actually distributed. And we had we thought about that a bit, and we I saw this in a viral meme on Facebook or Twitter or something. All well-meaning stuff, but these things can actually work. Not only are some of the E and within S and between E and S compete, but can be in conflict with each other. So if you go too heavily on one side, you need to think about what it's, and this you can only do if you have the right philosophy. If you're just chasing targets, then the E people will do the E stuff, the S people will do the S stuff, but as a company, you're not really moving towards sustainability. Last slide. So this is basically the result. We have companies in the top right quadrant, which basically is doing well on both X and Y axes, some on the soft side, but still catching up on the hard issues, and some the reverse. There you go. 20 minutes, or did I just overshoot by a little bit?
You're slightly overshot, but I think this is the most interesting slide, so I would spend just a few minutes on that one, yeah.
Okay. So those are the companies, the Hexaware, HCL, and TCS. They really responded very well to they brought the right people. First of all, they were quick to respond. A lot of companies required persistent follow-up, and I hate cold calling. I hate spam. So I'm not the kind of guy who would email you twice when I can do with one email. But we had to really, really go after some companies to get a response. And that was troublesome. But it's a reflection of responsiveness of an organization. We could not even reach to a point where we could reach their CSO, for example. But it got done over a period of time. The companies that are on the top right quadrant, we didn't have all those troubles, all those problems with them. They were quick to respond. They were quick to engage. They were happy to talk to us. Oh, you want to know about our sustainability programs? Here you go. This is the material that we can share with you. So they were transparent. They were diligent, and all of those things. And they were reasonably progressive on that 5-point scale on the E, S, and G criteria that I've demonstrated to you. So those are the three companies there: the Hexaware, HCL, and TCS. On the top left is basically, where did that go? Oh, I've got different slides on this. Cognizant, Emphasis, and Zensar. Infosys, Atos, and Capgemini on the bottom right, which is essentially they're pretty advanced, mostly all 4s, some 3s, but not so keen to kind of talk about, not so keen to engage on this subject. They took really very. In fact, I think 1 or 2 of them didn't even show up for the interviews. So we had interviews. I forgot to mention that. Other than filling out the template, they were supposed to bring their ESG people to the table and allow us to ask questions, clarify doubts, and have a conversation about ESG. That didn't happen with a couple of them in the bottom right, which is why their scores on the y-axis are very low. Questions, comments? And today I've got all my business cards, so I can share them with whoever needs them. No? Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemant.